I am going to, start the meeting. Yes. A meeting of the Pennichuck Water Special Committee is held Wednesday, May 17th at 2023 at 7:15 p.m. in the Aldermanic Chamber. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. Mr. Clerk, would you do that, please?
Thank you. Alderman at Large Melbourne Moran. Tom Lopez. Alderman Tom Lopez. Alderman Richard Dowd.
Present.
Alderman Michael O'Brien is present. And our clerk, Alderman Patricia Clay.
You mean Chairman.
Chairman, excuse me, I'm your clerk.
And I am here. We have 3 members in attendance.
Right.
Also in attendance, we have quite a large group. I'm trying to see here if we have on Zoom. We have Mr. Hudson on Zoom, George Bowser on Zoom as well. We have, I'm going to apologize. Do you have the list there of who we have? No? I'm going to have them as they come up, kind of address yourselves when you come up. But we have Mr. Goodhue and those from the Pennichuck Water Special Committee. Pennichuck Water here in attendance also. Public comment. Those here from the public who would like to speak, you can come up to the microphone, give your name, your address, and you'll have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Oops. Thank you very much. My name is Andrea Rebeck. I reside at 111 Atherton Avenue in Ward 3. Was that everything I was supposed to say?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. When I had first heard about the issue recently, I was pretty upset and then got very angry and drafted a bunch of comments. But then today I received some new materials, which gives me a very different feeling about this. I'll just recap what I wrote. I won't read it to you, but the first thing, my point was, if the city had bought this parcel when it had the opportunity, we wouldn't be here, of course, worrying about water pressure and taking down trees, but it's over. Second thing was just, since this is the Pennichuck meeting, I'm surprised when I hear them talk about the BOCA code. We don't use the BOCA code anymore, and we haven't for many, many years. In 2002, the city adopted the International Code Council's family of codes. And we're currently using the 2018 version of that code. The plumbing code specifies required water pressures for each type of fixture in a building. And that's an issue, I realize, with inadequate water pressure. I would kind of like Pennichuck folks to look into that, and I would like to know more about what they find. The third thing was, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the developer, when he was presenting his project for approval, assured everybody that water pressure and flow would be no problem. Now it seems there's a problem, and I'm just wondering why that information was not brought forth at the initial hearings. It could have had an opportunity to affect the outcome. However, the issue today is trees and access through the park, and from the drawing which I saw that the Public Works Department did, it looks like they came through for us. They really did their job with the extra mile to go out and verify what the conditions were and to come up with a better solution. And I hope that is the one that is accepted today. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Anybody else who wishes to speak? No? I'm sorry? I was just asking if there was anybody else that wished to speak. Seeing none, I will continue on. Communications?
There is none?
Well, actually we do. I should preface this. There have been attachments that have come to this committee after the agenda was created, and I'm going to ask the committee if we can suspend the rules if there's no exception. Suspend the rules to include 4 documents that have come forward. two of them coming from Attorney Perlman, and actually, I think one from Attorney Perlman, and three of them coming, no, two from Attorney Perlman, and two coming from Public Works in the descriptions, and put these in the minutes as such.
So moved.
Okay, and so without objection, we will put these into the minutes as such. They will be coming up on the screen as the meeting goes on. Unfinished business,
There is none.
okay, and new resolutions.
Before us this evening is R-23123. Bear with me while I
That's
flip the
okay.
page.
Yes, I know.
Authorizing the granting of an easement to the Pennichuck Water Works Incorporated for the construction and maintenance of a water line. Madam Chair, I would like to make a motion to recommend final passage.
Okay, I'm going to at this time ask Mr. Perlman, as well as Mr. Goodhue and his group, if you guys would please come up and have a seat. Yeah, please, have a seat. Same thing with you, Mr. Perlman. I should say Attorney Perlman, I apologize.
It's okay.
I need you to, how do I get rid of this? How do I get rid of that? Okay. And could you just put the clerk's, the PC for the clerk?
The what?
The PC for the clerk. I guess you have to do that?
What's that?
Okay, I can do that. Before I do that, I apologize. Mr. Hudson is here also from the city engineer. And Mr. Hudson, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Mr. Perlman if he would speak, because I know that there have been a few changes, and then I'm going to ask if you can speak, and then if Mr. Goodhue and his group wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask them to speak as well, if that works for everybody. Okay, so let me do this. Attorney Perlman, what,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so that's,
I didn't have the,
yeah, over there it says, we just have to do city clerk's desk, because we actually have it on the computer right now. Let's do this. Just switch over to us, yes.
oh, okay.
Which document did you want me to bring up?
That one's fine for now.
Did you want this document here, or this one?
Let's start there, please.
Here, okay.
Yep.
Just your name and so on, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good evening. My name is Andy Perlman. I'm an attorney with Pruner and Perlman here in Nashua, and I'm here on behalf of Raisin and Homes Elite Limited Liability Company. Just a brief overview, and then I'll get to the water line. Raisin and Homes Elite bought the subject property in March of 2022. And in 2022 and earlier this year, 2023, we went through the subdivision process to have approved 22 new lots on this site, as well as 2 lots right on the other side of the Barker House on Bartlett Avenue, so for a total of 22 new lots. Now, we knew going into this project that there were water pressure issues in this part of Nashua in the north end by Greeley Park, but we thought we'd be able to work with those water pressure issues with the existing lines on Bartlett in Wellington. As it turns out, there's not enough water pressure for the 22 new homes plus hydrants, the hydrant requirements from the fire department. And so beginning in January, February of this year, we began talking and meeting with our friends at Pennichuck about the best possible solution. And it was recommended to us that we extend a water line from the high pressure line on Manchester Street through Greeley Park to get to our site. And so that's what we've been working on. And so then I got to work with respect to title work on Greeley Park and trying to identify the legal basis for an easement. As it turns out, in 1918, when Pennichuck conveyed this portion of Greeley Park from Pennichuck to the city, Pennichuck retained a waterline easement rights to run a water line across this section of what's now Greeley Park. And so what we're asking this committee and ultimately the Board of Aldermen is to modify the existing easement by shifting its location to what is being proposed, what you see up on the screen before you. The technical piece of this, I would defer to our friends at Pennichuck. I'm by no means an engineer, but I will say that we believe that our proposed route is the better route. This afternoon, for the first time, we saw the proposed easement route from the Public Works. And while at first blush, there's some appeal to following the Greeley Park Road, and that was initially my gut reaction I thought it made all the sense in the world. But we believe our proposed route through the field and through the trees, getting up to the Raisin property is less impactful. We'll have less tree damage, and we'll grow over and will be, essentially won't be seen in a few years. And the reason we say that is because the Greeley Park Road has trees right on the road, and they're mature, beautiful trees. I was out there today, and we're concerned that when you take out that road, install a water line, that the root damage that we're going to do to the trees will essentially kill these mature trees right along the Greeley Park Road, as opposed to our proposed route, which, again, I was out there today, where it cuts through the trees on the eastern portion of the proposed easement is very young saplings and not a lot of big trees, and there's a path to get there with really minimal tree cutting, and really we believe that's the least impactful, the best route to take. The benefit of the proposed water line and the easement is that obviously the Raisin project will have water, but as you know, Madam Chair, when the water line ties into the existing system on the corner of Bartlett and Wellington, the water line will then provide additional pressure to 40 some odd homes in this north end neighborhood, which I think everyone would agree would be a great benefit to the homes and homeowners and families that live there. Madam Chair, that's all I have at the moment. I'm happy to answer any questions, or perhaps we'll hear from Mr. Goodhue and folks from Pennichuck.
Thank you. I think I'm going to ask, can you shut off that screen there? Yeah. Did it work? No, not that one. Oop, you shut that whole thing off.
What do you want?
I just wanted to go back to we have to go back on here. I think we lost Dan on the big screen.
There we go.
Okay. Dan, Mr. Hudson, are you there? Wasn't sure if we lost you.
Yes, I am, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted you to also speak to the plan that you had when you did your walkthrough with Director Photo on Monday. And I'd like to hear from you, and then I want to hear from Mr. Goodhue and Pennichuck.
Sure, I'd be happy to speak to it again, Hudson City Engineer. We, after submission of the proposed legislation, we were asked to review and comment on the proposal. Our main concern is tree cutting in Greeley Park, specifically between the proposed development and Manchester Street. Our concerns with the proposal as presented is that they're going to cut a swath through what's currently a buffer, well-vegetated tree buffer between Manchester Street and this subdivision. Our alternate idea, which we'd be happy to at any point speak further about with Penchuck, the developer, is running along the existing road as noted in the park, and then intercepting the development at a point up that road. We believe that cutting through up there, that'll be less visible from Manchester Street. And then having the water line run in an existing road, that will remain cleared, which I think is beneficial to future water line maintenance and that sort of thing as well. So that was kind of the thought process. We believe it'd be less impactful to do the route we proposed, but we're open to further discussion on the issue and welcome any input that Penchuck has.
Okay, you did hear what Attorney Perlman had said relative to that they felt that there could be more impact on more mature trees going across the paved area.
Sure, we'd be happy to walk it with them. We can have Brian Conant, the superintendent of Parks and Rec, with us. Brian knows trees. I think there are probably ways to mitigate the potential damage that was noted. I mean, you don't have to use the biggest piece of equipment there is to do the construction, that sort of thing. So, I think we would need more input from a tree expert, so to speak, about what the potential impacts are there. But it is clear to us if they cut through as proposed, and that's going to be visible from Manchester Street across the grassed area into the development, and that's the aspect that we envision the public may be concerned about, and that's why we raised and suggested maybe an alternate route.
Oh, okay, thank you. Mr. Perlman, Attorney Perlman, you had, I saw you shaking your head when you said, when he talked about a walkthrough. Are your client is accepting of that?
Sure. In all honesty, Madam Chair, this is moving pretty quickly, and we haven't had a walk with city staff just yet, and we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you. And for the public to understand, I did speak with Mr. Goodhue and his team prior to the meeting as well. And to make this very clear, this easement is for the developer's benefit, and that's why we're doing it. And this is not Penchuck requesting this easement. This is the developer requesting this easement. So I just want to make that very clear. This is not Penchuck doing it. It has to come through this board, so Penchuck can explain. Did I say that correctly, Mr. Goodhue?
That is correct, Alderman Clee. This is Larry Goodhue, CEO of Penchuck. Along with me up here is John Bovair, our chief engineer, and Pete Tedder, our distribution engineering manager. Also in attendance, if needed, is our Chief Operating Officer, Donald Ware, our Director of Water Supply, Chris County, and our Distribution Engineer, Ryan Hool. We wanted to make sure that we had the resources in the room to answer any questions you might have. But your statement is correct right out of the gate, Alderman Clee, in that this requested easement is totally for the developers' purposes of bringing water to their development. As a regulated water utility, we have a designated franchise area. We have an obligation to provide public water, but it is not our obligation to extend mains to a developer. That is all at that developer's cost, and they need to find the best route to get there. They will work with us to get guidance and to make sure that it's designed to the specs that are needed in order to effectively accomplish what is needed. The attorney mentioned not only potable water for homes, but also fire protection. So there's certain pressure requirements and supply requirements that have to be considered in something like this. But the one statement about us altering an existing easement in exchange for this is not what we would be looking at. We have existing easements that are in place for our existing infrastructure and for our existing needs that were put in place for a purpose. Those would remain in place and are not supposed to be tied at the hip to something like this. there should be a consideration unto its own relative to what the needs are from this developer, if it is thereby granted by the Board of Aldermen to grant this easement for that designated purpose. So I thought that that would be good to put on the record.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. And to Mr. Goodhue's comment about the current easement, one of the questions that I had put forward to him was, were they willing to give up their easement? And that's when he explained to me that this is not a request from Pennichuck so much as it is. And it would be similar to, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Goodhue, it'd be similar than if I built a new home and I had to bring in water from the street to myself.
That is absolutely correct. Our tariffs are uniformly administered to any customers. So again, within a designated franchise area. And before I go any further, George Bauer is online. He is the chairman of our board of directors, and I want to apologize that I didn't mention that right up front. But with any customer within our franchise area, whether it be an individual home, a business, a development, if there's a water main in the street in front of a home, that customer can hook up to water, they have to pay for that connection, that service line to go into their home. But if there isn't a water main and they need water to come to them, they have to pay for the main extension to get to their property line, to then pay for that service line to go to the property. That's administered regardless of who the developer is, whoever the customer is within our designated franchise area, and that's by our tariffs. The only cost that we bear by tariff is that we provide 1 times annual revenue back to that connector as our contribution. That's our allowed contribution towards that extension.
Okay, thank you very much. And I also want to make a point that Attorney Perlman had actually pointed out. There are 46 homes outside of this project that will benefit from this increase. So I want that to be on the public record as well. These are homes that have been suffering. So before we go any further, Alderman Dowd, you had a question.
Yeah, I have just a couple clarifying
Sure.
questions. The blue line that's recommended by Public Works, is there an increased cost to go that route, number one? And number two, that's running right down a road that as I remember, is not in great shape. Would the line be run under the road? And if so, does the road need to be repaved after has the water line run down? And who pays for that? How, is that a huge added expense?
So I'm going to defer this question to our chief engineer, John Bovair, who will answer that question for you, Alderman Dowd.
Thanks, Larry. This is John Bovair. I'm the chief engineer for Pennichuck, for the record. At this point, we're not really prepared to answer what those costs may be or whatever, nor do we, it's not really our project or to really run this. This is really the developer's decision to be able to go one route or the other, and what their costs are, I can't really say. But in general, if you're looking in the future to replace a water main that is under a paved roadway, it's always going to be more expensive than if that water main isn't. That's the cost of those maintenance long-term in the future. But at this point, from the initiation of this project, we're not prepared to talk about those costs at this point.
Follow up
Absolutely.
to Dan Hudson. Was the line that you were looking at going to be run under the road? And if so, what shapes that road in? And if it goes under that road, who's gonna repave it?
So, and Dan Hudson, city engineer. Those are all excellent questions. I'd be happy to discuss those with Pennichuck when we walk it, and or the developer. Yes, I believe it would make sense to run down the middle of the road. Yes, it probably would make sense to repave it. Who paves it is up for discussion. This is a being done on this development and on this water line. I don't view that as a large incremental cost increase, relative to the whole big picture here. But that's something that we could certainly discuss.
So,
So we look forward to further discussion on that, I guess is what I'd say.
So since it looks like another walkthrough is required before any final decision is made, I mean, I'm still open if we need additional discussion, but it sounds to me like this is gonna have to be tabled until that second walkthrough.
I want
You
to
don't have
add.
to put your hand up, you're the
I know,
chair.
no, I was trying to point to you, thank you. I'd like to call it myself. I did have a quick conversation with Attorney Bolton prior to this meeting, and I am going to recommend an amendment to this, and probably will be tabled. This is also going on to Public Works. It originally was slated to go to the Greeley Park Advisory Committee, but as that committee has not been put together yet, it's gonna go to Public Works for their anointing and so on. So the recommendation of an amendment that we are going to consider, it was longer, but since my conversation with Mr. Goodhue, I'm gonna drop the portion off of relinquishing the easement. And it basically will read that I move that the committee recommend amendment of resolution R 23-123 by replacing Bartlett Avenue with Manchester Street and by addition of the following language after the word attached, except that the location of the easement area shall be determined by city engineer Daniel Hudson in order to preserve the greatest number of trees. And that's basically and I can bring the resolution up. But that is going to be a recommended amendment per Attorney Bolton, excuse me, to make that recommendation. But before we get there, I'd like to hear from Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you. I'm glad Alderman Dow was going to say that. I have it up at the State House. If it ain't ready for prime time, you don't push the bill, you know. And it seems like this is open to quite the consideration. So, Mr. Perlman, my question is to you. Do you have a timeline that you need this particular information by? When are you shovel ready?
Madam Chair, Mr. O'Brien, the goal is to get a base course of asphalt down before the asphalt plants close this fall. And so going backwards from that, there's a lot of work to do in terms of squaring away all legal and planning board conditions, clearing. And so we want to try and keep this moving and keep this on, I don't want to say a fast track, but maybe come back for your next hearing of this committee. Right, so we do want to keep it moving.
Okay.
And
Madam Chair?
sure.
It seems to be, is your amendment forwarded at this particular point?
I would have no problems with not doing the amendment if we do end up tabling this and we
Okay.
could get a clearer amendment from legal. That would be formal and such. This was just trying to get an amendment if we were going to be moving it. And just for Attorney Perlman, obviously we would need a Pennichuck here as well, but the Pennichuck Special Water Committee meeting is usually called at the call of the chair. So if we wanted to, we could have one next week.
Okay. I appreciate that.
But so,
A follow-up?
sure.
At this particular time, Madam Chair, I don't think I could really support the amendment because, again, it seems like there's got to be some future negotiations. Some engineering facts need to be applied here. And I just hope that your amendment doesn't narrowly focus the scope of field into which might come back and to look at it, you know?
Actually, the amendment is more, the recommended amendment is more broad, that it basically says that shall be determined by city engineer Dan Hudson in order to preserve the greatest number of trees. So it kind of is very broad-based. It would allow Mr. Hudson and Public Works to work with Attorney Perlman and Raisinin to kind of come up with a best plan for both parties and so on. So that was all the amendment. But if we're going to table it, I don't think there's a need for this amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Alderman O'Brien. I don't think we're ready for amendment until they do the walkthrough and take a look at this. There's pros and cons to each approach, and just based on the picture, there may be more trees cut down with the red line, but I think that, and I don't think you want to plant trees over, if you put a water line in there. So, I think they need to go and do a walkthrough and find out the pros and cons and come back to this committee and DPW. It is park land, and I'm concerned about the cost and the future implications of putting a water line underneath a road. Because we all know that if anything ever happens and you have to dig it up, it's far more expensive. So I think I'm gonna move to table this until the next meeting. The other thing I will caution is that, as chair of budget, we don't have a lot of nights. And the few that we have would probably have to be tied in with something else. So, the scheduling could be an issue through the rest of May and June.
And I agree, which is why I would, before you make a motion to table, because that will stop all discussion, I'm going to ask Mr. Goodhue and his group, if we were to meet at like a 6 o'clock meeting, is that something you would be able to do? My biggest problem would be getting my board here at 6 o'clock.
Timing would not be an issue. The day of the week may be, depending on other commitments.
Okay.
But certainly, we can accommodate any time of day depending on if there's availability on that particular date. But we would do our best to bring, if not our entire team, members of our team that would be needed in order to accomplish what is needed at a meeting.
And before
So
we.
yes, I'll hold my motion because it's non-debatable. but I'll
Exactly.
hold that.
Yes.
But
I think that's where we're going to be going anyways, but.
yeah, so I have another question. I'm hearing about this timeline, and I'm sure that Pennachuck's not just waiting around to dig another hole. How does that fit into your work scope?
Well, like we said, this would be a project that the developer will undertake. We would do the inspection and stuff, but it's not a Pennachuck project.
Okay.
It's being installed by the proponent of the project, so no difficulties here on our part.
So if it's going down the middle of the road, sounds like the developer would have to repave that road. So that might be another consideration. The cost, one of the things I'd like to know is what cost are we throwing on the developer for the two options?
And again, I think that's something that Mr. Hudson and Attorney Perlman can discuss. That road, for someone who walks it a lot, will know that that road is not in the best of shape.
I was just there today, you're absolutely right.
Yes, it is thin and is bumpy and it is lots of roots. So the breaking up of the road won't be as difficult as doing it. And I do have a question for Mr. Hudson again. Mr. Hudson, are you saying that this will definitely go under the road and not alongside the road?
No, I'm not definitely saying that. I think we should walk it and define an appropriate route. I mean, this could end up being a win-win if we do run it down the road and we end up repaving the road, you know, despite whose cost it is. So, I mean, I welcome walking it and discussing the various alternatives, or maybe in addition to the one that was proposed.
I think that is important as well, and I will work with Donna. I will work with Donna to try to get as early a meeting and talk with my committee members, and if necessary, perhaps get an at-large here that could be in place so that we're guaranteed to have a quorum and we're not wasting anybody's time. But I think we can work on our end with that as long as you guys are all amenable to that. Before I do close this to Alderman Dowd's request, it probably won't be necessarily part of this, but I don't want to have to shut down communications. One of the speakers, actually the only speaker, she made some kind of comments that may or may not directly approach this, and I saw your group kind of talking, so if you wouldn't mind she references something about the Boca code versus the international, and it's all Greek to me, so if you wouldn't mind just kind of addressing that very
Sure.
quickly. Thank you.
So, Mr. Goodhue here, and again, I'm going to defer to John Bover, our chief engineer, because he can speak more to the requirements we must meet for water pressure and what those standards are in the state of New Hampshire.
And I appreciate that, thank you.
Yeah, as from the water utility side of things.
And
we're-
just your name, please.
I'm John Boyer, Chief
Okay.
Engineer for
Thank you.
Pennachuck, yes. For a water utility in the state of New Hampshire, whether you're municipally owned or private owned, our requirements, we all have to meet the New Hampshire DES requirements for, water quality and water delivery, and that includes, minimum, maximum pressures. There are, in current rules, we also have to meet, provisions of the Public Utilities Commission for delivery of water quality and water pressure. In many instances, the rules that we apply today were developed where systems had developed over time, since in the case of the 1800s here. So sometimes in areas that have been developed before these rules have been put in place, do have substandard pressure. Some have enormously high pressure. And those are systems that we really can't do anything about. They were here before the regulations, but normally, under worst case conditions, under emergency conditions, under fire flows, we try to maintain a minimum of 20 PSI, pounds per square inch in our systems. Normal operating pressures were maintained and trying to maintain greater than 40 pounds per square inch. So if anything was being built new, those are the target numbers that we try to hit. And unfortunately, up in the Bartlett area, it's on the top of the hill. It used to be where a storage tank and a pond and reservoir was. So it was one of the highest points in the system. And it's not a matter of our treatment plant not putting out enough pressure. We're trying to work with the different systems that we have to deliver water at a high place. They're plagued by elevation, not anything else at that point. And we're trying to make improvements and looking to make improvements. And this project will actually improve the pressures of some of those folks. But the BOCA code doesn't, it applies to building codes and things, but those are inside the building. We operate outside in the streets. So it's we're not under the BOCA codes.
I appreciate that, and I know, Alderman Dowd, you have a question, but there was also another document that was given to us as such, and I believe that came from one of your people, Mr. Goodhue, and that is this document that I'm going to put up there. And can I ask you to speak to this one as well? Make sure I have the right one. That's it.
And perhaps at this juncture, our distribution engineering manager, Peter Tedder, can walk people through what this represents.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
My name's Pete Tedder. I'm the distribution engineering manager. This map represents the current system. Right now, you see the red line to the right. That represents the threshold where pressures drop to 40 pounds or less. And that would be anything to the left and north of that line. With the improved pressure offered by connecting to the Manchester pressure system, that area of 40 pounds or less is reduced to the contained area in the red line that says Manchester high pressure system. We'll be able to offer better pressure to anyone below that area, or to everyone in that area. The yellow lines represent where we envision the high pressure system extending to. And then at the highest point in that area is where our tank used to be at the end of Columbia Ave, where the cul-de-sac is located.
So just for the benefit of the public, where you're seeing those yellow lines, those are the additional homes that will be added to. Those are the 46 homes that
Yes,
will
beyond-
that will be benefiting from this potential.
Yes, ma'am, beyond the
The 21
development
homes,
that's being
yeah, or
proposed.
22 homes, yes, exactly. And so I wanted to make that very clear by showing this so that people can see kind of exactly where the areas are going to be. I know I did speak to some Pennachuck that this entire area is going to need to be upgraded in the near future, hopefully the very near future. But we know that things happen at the pace that they happen. But So again, I'm not saying one way or the other how the committee will or will not go, but I do see the benefit of this. It's not just, and I do want to make clear for the public that this, while the resident is going to be the one putting it in, it is benefiting other people. And I hate to see even a single tree cut down, but it is what it is if we can start to help other people. I'm going to ask one question that was asked to me, and Attorney Perlman, I apologize that I did not, and perhaps this would be for Pennichuck. The question that was asked to me in the past is, why aren't we coming off of Concord and going up Bartlett Street? It just seems like a logical place. Why bother going through that? Is there anybody here who could kind of speak to that? Probably Peter. If you
Yes,
just say
ma'am.
your name again.
Pete Tedder,
Yeah.
distribution engineer with Pennichuck. The pressure being supplied off of Concord Street is a lower pressure. It's the HGL, the height that water would rise to if it was in an open tube, and it would be 310 feet. The pressure on the Manchester Street high pressure system, water in a tube would rise to 371 feet, actually picking up almost 61 feet of additional pressure. Yeah, that's about 20 pounds.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. It's still very Greek to me, so, but I did want the public to hear that. I'm sorry, Alderman Dowd, you did have a question.
Yeah, this is to Dan Hudson, city engineer.
I will
When you're
bring
out doing that walk, that road that we're talking about in Grilly Park is a fire road, so the fire trucks can get in if there's ever a fire in those woods we're talking about. And can you make sure that that road is not in such a condition that it should be paved anyway or fixed?
Yeah, yes, for that.
I think we're getting very close that that road needs to be depending, but it doesn't matter which area you're coming from. I hear from my constituents as well as my husband who walks there with the greyhounds, the amount of holes that they're tripping on, even coming in from the Concord side is getting quite,
And
yeah.
once we pave it, there's a 5-year is it 5 or 7-year moratorium?
A 5-year on
Digging it
Manchester
up.
Street. I don't know
So
if this would have that 5-year
I don't think it's
moratorium.
on his schedule to pave anytime soon. But whenever you're ready, I'll make my motion.
Are there any other comments that anybody here wanted to make?
Just,
Yes, sure.
my former job, I was just wondering, between two guests, are these going to be private or municipal hydrants?
Municipal.
They're going to be municipal? Okay.
The firefighter
The road,
commission.
as we understand it, this is John Boisvert, our chief engineer, is the streets inside there will be public streets, and therefore these mains will be public water mains and the hydrants will be public at that point. If there were private roads and private streets, that would be possibly a different story, but at least at this time, they'd be public.
Yeah, that's the difference in condo associations where the roads are private, they pay for the hydrants, unless there's some other agreement.
And-
And public streets, they belong to the city.
Oh, I'm quite familiar. I shoveled every single one of those pumps.
And I do want to give Attorney Perlman, if you want to, you do not have to speak to this, but a comment was made about the planning board having approved everything because they were sure the water was appropriate and so on, and now we're kind of backtracking on that. Did either one of you want to speak to that
Oh,
also?
Madam Chair, Andy Perlman again for Resident Homes. I don't think we're backtracking. I mean, it's a routine process that we go through with planning board where there are a set of conditions that we have to fulfill, one of which is making sure that the site has adequate water. We knew we'd have an issue. We thought we'd be able to make it work coming in with the existing lines. Turns out that's not the case, so we're just solving it with a different method.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other comments anybody wants to make before I let Alderman Dowd out of the cage?
No, thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Again, since there's a lot of information that we need to collect from another walkthrough, I make a motion to table our 23-123 until such time as we have the information that allows us to pass this.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Alderman Lopez isn't here to oppose, so. Okay, that motion is tabled, and you'll note that for the
Yep.
record, okay?
Madam Chair,
Yes,
thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Members of the committee, I appreciate your time. We'll be back.
And I want to say that I appreciate everybody's time, especially knowing that you have to come back again. I will work with Donna to try to get it as much as possible. I'll work with my committee, and we'll probably look at it an earlier time. We can probably get this, once we have all the details, we'll get it all hashed out within an hour.
Yeah.
I'm sure, I feel confident about that. And so that we can bring it on to Public Works as well, so, okay?
Thank you
Thank
again.
you so much for your
Okay.
time,
Thank you.
everybody. Thank you. New business ordinances?
There is none.
General discussion. Public comment, is there anybody from the public that would like to have additional comments? No? Okay, remarks by the alderman. I'm just gonna make a very quick comment. I truly appreciate my constituents and the public for coming out, from listening, and for commenting. I hear a lot from them. They have concerns, as do, I think, many residents here about any loss of trees. I have to balance that issue of more pressure for homes, loss of trees. I don't want to give up one just to get the other, but we may have to, so I appreciated Mr. Hudson coming out and doing the walkabout, and I appreciate everybody else who's willing to do the walk and talk about everything that can happen, so we can do as few trees, lose as few trees as possible. So I appreciate all that, and I thank everybody from coming out. Mr. Clerk,
Yes, I would like to make a motion to adjourn.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The meeting of the Pennachuck Special Water Committee is closed at 8:01 PM. Thank you so much.